Section 19, Shadowland, September 1919. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Donald Warren. Shadowland, September 1919, by Various. Section 19. The Court of the Sage. Greetings to thee, friend. Come hither, and I will conduct thee on a pleasant journey. Come, let us reason together. A gentleman who hangs his hat in Chicago and calls that his home does not wish his name mentioned, but wants me to tell him my opinion of evolution. First, here's the greatest authority of all, Herbert Spencer, who says that evolution is a change from an indefinite, incoherent homogeneity to a definite, coherent heterogeneity through continuous differentiations and integrations. After this formula was pronounced, the universe probably heaved a sigh of relief as it filed away this plain, simple, obvious account of itself. The true history of creation is now pretty generally understood, even by the school children, and as the years go by, the doctrine of evolution takes firmer root and seems destined to be universally accepted. But evolution takes us up to man, and there it stops. What next? That is the question. Assuming that this inscrutable mystery that we call God was the contracting engineer of the universe, and that he evolved the heavens, the earth, and the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms, and finally man, what next? The reins are now in man's hands. The will of man now controls. Man determines what animal shall survive and what shall not. Man destroys this tree or that plant and grows another. Man creates new varieties of fruit, plant, tree, and cereal, and breeds new varieties of domestic animals. Man tames the wild beast and makes the desert blossom as the rose, turns the course of rivers, levels mountains, and harnesses the elements to do his bidding. But man himself has stopped evolving. He is not so strong nor so fleet as his savage ancestors, nor can he see nor hear as well. Yet he is superior in every other way. He is not so strong, yet he is vastly more powerful, for he has captured steam and electricity. His eyes are not so good, yet he can see better, for he has the microscope, X-ray, and a telescope. And furthermore, the pictures he sees are made permanent by photography. His ears are not so good, but he can hear better, for he has the telephone, the phonograph, and the wireless telegraphy. His legs are not so dexterous, yet he can move faster, for he has the bicycle, the locomotive, the automobile, aeroplane, and a motorboat. His hands are not so powerful and large, but he can make more and better implements, for he has tools and machinery. In fact, every department shows a rest of bodily development and an increase in mental faculties. Query: shall evolution hereafter be confined only to man's mental and spiritual growth? And if so, what has the future in store for man's personality? Shall not his soul go on evolving? If so, where? Even the sage cannot answer this. Success knocks at every man's door and keeps knocking. Look carefully, and you will see her there, trying to get in. Certainly, I am opposed to liquor selling, and it is a very good law they have passed, making it a crime to manufacture liquor. There is no earthly reason why people should drink liquor when there is plenty of water to be had. It is also a crime to smoke tobacco and cigars, and there should be a law forbidding that. Smoking is a filthy and unhealthy habit. It does no good to anybody, and often does a great deal of harm. And while we are about it, why not abolish chewing gum, drinking ice cream sodas, eating candy, cake and ice cream, and all such unnecessary luxuries? For that matter, what's the use of dessert at all? And while we are on the subject, deciding what is good for people and what is not, and what we want them to do and what we don't want them to do, why not pass a law forbidding the manufacture and use of soups for dinner? Why soup? In olden times, people sat down and ate their roast pig or their bread and milk or shoulder of lamb with some potatoes and bread and butter, and what was good enough for them is good enough for us. Therefore, let us abolish all course dinners. Why not confine the human family to a diet of bread and milk? The race would be more healthy, and it would be a tremendous economy. At the same time, while we are in the economy business, I see no necessity for pictures, statuary, paintings, vases, canes, collars, neckties, rings, stick pins, dogs, cats, and 1,000 other things I might mention. These are all superfluous luxuries, and we should learn to do without them. The stopping of the liquor traffic is the first step. Hooray! Let us take the next step, then another, and another, until finally we'll be living near to nature's heart like Robinson Crusoe, the Indians, the cliff dwellers, yea, like Adam and Eve. Mr. L.T.B. must wait for his answer, because I have not yet made certain whether the size of Charlie Chaplin's shoes is 16 or 17. In answering questions about the salaries of actors and actresses, I must draw a distinction between real money and stage money. The publicity man and the players have a habit of speaking in big figures because it sounds nice. It is quite true that Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Charlie Chaplin have made something like $1 million a year each, and I guess it is real money. But when they tell me geniuses like Fatty Arbuckle are receiving $10,000 a week, I am inclined to think that a large part of it is stage money. If not, it certainly pays to be fat, even if you are not funny. Mrs. Thompson, the several Bibles of the world are the Koran of the Mohammedans, the Tripitaka of the Buddhists, the 5 Kings of the Chinese, the 3 Vedas of the Hindus, the Eddas of the Scandinavians, the Zendavesta or Zend-Avesta of the Persians, and the scriptures of the Christians. Of these, the Koran is the more recent, dating about the middle of the 17th century. I have the pleasure to announce to a Jacksonville young man that Mother Goose was real. Her maiden name was Eliza Foster, born 1665, married Isaac Goose, 1693, joined Old South Church, Boston, and died in 1757 at the age of 92. I know of no particular objection to taxing bachelors. It is about as successful as taxing anything else, or about as absurd. Our reasons for taxing things, except land, are usually very ridiculous. They taxed windows in England, which finally resulted in windowless houses. Tax bachelors? Certainly tax all luxuries. The only fear is that if we tax bachelors too much, they might commit suicide, preferring death to matrimony. Some old philosopher has observed, the married man is like the bee that fixes his hive, augments the world, benefits the republic, and by a daily vigilance without wronging any, profits all. But he who condemns wedlock, for the most part, like a wasp, wanders in offense to the world, disturbs the peace, and makes misery as his due reward. M. Muriello is informed that the word Dago is a corruption of Diego, James, San Diego being the patron saint of the Spanish. It was first applied to the Spaniards in Louisiana, but later to the Italians and Portuguese. CMB asks if I know how many words there are in the Bible. I don't, unless I can accept Dr. Horn's statement. He spent over 3 years in making the following compilation, which time could perhaps have been put to better advantage. Books, 66. Chapters, 1,189. Verses, 31,173. Words, 773,746. Letters, 3,566,480. I don't think the query of John T. Muldoon is very timely. He asked the origin of the expression almighty dollar. I know of no such thing as the almighty dollar. During the last 2 or 3 years, all the dollars I have been anything but almighty. A dollar today is not worth much more than a dime was a few years ago, because you can't get much for it. I believe that Washington Irving was the first to use the expression almighty dollar, but Ben Jonson speaks of almighty gold. Am I opposed to the Prohibition Amendment? Certainly I am, but I am not strong on the theory of violation of personal liberty that I hear so much about. Liberty? What is liberty? Where can I find liberty? Everywhere I go, I am confronted with the rights of others. May I smoke, or go barefoot, or naked? Not if it interferes with your alleged rights. May you do as you please? Yes, provided you do not do that which infringes on my rights. If I choose to say that your form of worship interferes with my rights, who is to say whether it does or does not? Nobody wants to respect the liberty of others when he thinks it interferes with his own. Where can I go? What can I do? And what price must I pay to secure the right to be let alone? There is nobody since the time of Adam, except Robinson Crusoe, who enjoyed real liberty. In fact, Adam did not enjoy much liberty after Eve appeared upon the scene. Liberty is a thing of the past. We are bound hand and foot with the rights of others. Men are now absolutely dependent on one another, and we cannot expect much liberty as long as we have to respect the rights of 10,000 other men on whom we must depend for our milk, our bread, our meat, our clothes, our coal, our books, and so on. Let every man provide himself with a pair of judgment scales in which to weigh the merits and demerits of his fellows. Since the best of men have their faults and the worst of women their virtues, let us put them on the scales and judge if they are worthy. To discard a friend because he has 2 faults, where he has 20 virtues, is folly. No less than 3 anxious inquirers have written asking me where hell is. They will probably find out for themselves some day. Acherusia, a cavern on the borders of Pontus in Asia Minor, was fabled to lead to hell or the infernal regions. And through this cavern Hercules was believed to have directed the 3-headed watchdog of hell, Cerberus, to the earth. There seems to be no dispute about this, and no other places have laid serious claim to the distinction except New York, Monte Carlo, Paris, and Chicago. Miss M.T.R. is respectfully informed that the famous Mary who had a little lamb was a real girl. She was a Massachusetts girl, and her lamb was one of twins, dispossessed from the pen by its cruel and unnatural mother, just as it was later dispossessed from school by the heartless teacher. A young writing master named Ralston, preparing for Harvard, was at school on that Memorial Day, and it was he who wrote the verse which rivaled those of Dante and Milton's as far as fame is concerned. The famous lamb was undoubtedly born under an unlucky star, although I have not its horoscope, for it was finally killed by the horns of an angry cow. Somebody wants to know if I believe that Fridays are unlucky. Being an American, how can I? America's Unlucky Friday. Columbus sailed from Palos on Friday, August 3rd, and discovered the New World on Friday, October 12, 1492. On Friday, June 13, 1498, he discovered the American continent. On Friday, March 5, 1497, Cabot received his papers from Henry VII, which resulted in the discovery of North America. On Friday, September 6, 1565, Mendez founded St. Augustine, the oldest town in the United States. On Friday, November 10, 1620, the Mayflower first disembarked a few immigrants at Provincetown, and on Friday, December 22nd, her passengers finally landed at Plymouth Rock. Washington was born on Friday, February 22nd, 1732. The Union of the Colonies was made on Friday, May 20, 1775. Bunker Hill was fought on Friday, June 12, 1775, and the Saratoga surrender took place on Friday, October 17, 1777, which resulted in our recognition by France. The surrender at Yorktown was on Friday, October 19, 1781, and on Friday, June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee read the Declaration of Independence to the Continental Congress. Let us all be very careful then not to undertake anything serious on a Friday, for we are sure to have bad luck. Those who believe in lucky or unlucky days should remember that there can be no gain without some loss and no loss without some gain. If your horse wins, someone lost. If you had good luck at cards, someone lost. If you find a purse, someone lost. If your stocks go up, someone lost. Hence, what might be a lucky day for you would be an unlucky day for someone else. Likewise, when you are praying for fair weather, the farmer is praying for rain, and in summer, when you are praying for a rainstorm, the yachtsmen and mariners are fearing it. You refer to Pythagoras. It was Pythagoras who said, "There is nothing true in this world," to which Aristotle answered, "The proposition is either true or false. If false, we are not bound to believe it, and if true, there is something true in this world, and your proposition is false." Smart Aleck is informed that I am not related to Russell Sage, nor am I made of the material from which they make a certain kind of tea that is supposed to prevent the hair from fading. You can't tell anything about names. Eugene Sue was not a lawyer. Hal Caine is the antithesis of Abel's brother. Hardy was not noted for endurance. Samuel Smiles was not over-cheerful. Howells was not at all boisterous. Longfellow was not tall. Gay was not noted for gaiety. Burns was not all that fiery. Chatterton was nothing of a chatterbox. Akenside had no such pains. Goldsmith saw but little gold and less jewelry. Roger Bacon was an astrologer and an alchemist, and while in search of the philosopher's stone, discovered gunpowder by accident. It was this, more than anything else, that made Roger famous. But when future historians come to estimate the results of his seeming great discovery, they will write it infamous. A correspondent asked me to print the most famous of limericks. Nobody can say which is the most famous, for there are several that have gone the rounds, and which are repeated year after year, among which I will mention two. There once was a man with a beard, who said, "'Tis just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren, have built their nest in my beard." In the drinking well, which the plumber built her, Aunt Eliza fell. We must buy a filter. A high school lad wants to know the maxims of the 7 wise men of Greece. Here they are. Know thy opportunity, Pittacus. Most men are bad, Bias. Know thyself, Solon. Consider the end, Elon. Avoid excess, Cleobulus. Nothing is impossible to industry, Periander. Suretyship is the precursor of ruin, Thales. That Rousseau was at times addicted to the use of unreasoned superstitions is shown in his Confessions. On that memorial day at Les Charmettes, being distressed with doubts as to the safety of his soul, he sought to determine the point by throwing a stone at a tree. Hit, sign of salvation. Miss, sign of damnation. The tree being near at hand, and a large one, the result was, of course, reassuring. There is no end. If, while on this earth, we live such lives that have created personalities worthy of immortality, worthy of perpetuation, worthy of a nobler end and a wider scope than this world affords, does it not seem reasonable that these personalities should go on evolving like every other living thing? The fittest of every species always survives, never dies. All nature proclaims this law. Nothing can be destroyed. The minutest atom will exist forever. When we have, or God has, created a superior character, soul or personality that has made the best of its environment, circumstances, and possibilities can we, by any stretch of the imagination, or by any law of nature or of evolution, say that it is probable that that soul, character, or personality shall be destroyed at the grave? The case, or body, goes back to Mother Earth, whence it came, for it is only a dwelling, but the soul must go back to the God that created it. The brain dies, but that is but a workshop. The body is soon absorbed and becomes part of nature's materials. But the intelligence, the will, the personality must leave its temporary residence and cannot die. If the soul has evolved and improved while on earth, it seems reasonable to assume that it will go on evolving and improving in some higher form of life. It is the law of growth. It is the struggle for permanency of existence. Victor Hugo said that the greatest Pelagian was Homer, the greatest Hellen, Achilles, the greatest Hebrew, Isaiah, the greatest Roman, Juvenal, the greatest Italian, Dante, and the greatest Briton, Shakespeare. Not every person will agree with V.H. If a vote were to be taken, Moses would probably get more votes than Isaiah, and either Julius Caesar or Augustus or Marcus Aurelius more than Juvenal. And if the list were extended, Franklin might be named the greatest American, Goethe the greatest German, and perhaps Hugo himself the greatest Frenchman. Was it not a mistake to build us with ears facing forward, to hear all the good that others say to our face? For if they faced aft, we might profit more by hearing the truth spoken behind our backs. GTR 16 is informed that her condoned sin was an old biograph Griffith six-reeler with these players: Blanche Sweet, Henry Walthall, Mae Marsh, Robert Heron, Lillian Gish, Dorothy Gish, and Gertrude Bambrick. It was reissued January 1917. Note that all these players are now stars, whereas when they played in this picture, probably not one of them got more than $50 a week. Thank you, the Jakes, Jolly Tar, for your interesting letter. Heave ho, my lads, heave ho, and bring you back to terra firma. Hope you will like the sage better than the answer man. Course you will. Think nothing but beautiful thoughts of beautiful things. Dream of nothing but beautiful color and tender hues. Seek for nothing but lovely tones and graceful lines. The reason that all human beings of both sexes, young and old, big and little, ignorant and learned, respect gray hairs, is that we all intuitively feel the superiority of the seasoned and matured mind. Otherwise, we should despise them as we do things that are going into decay. Not one man in 1,000 is ripe until he is 60, and until that time his opinion is not worth much. Young men for action, for fighting in all physical pursuits, but for everything else the man of middle age, which is from 50 to 70, always provided that man has lived sensibly and temperately, for not until about 50 or 60 do we really come into possession of our best faculties. Put not your faith in astrologers, dear Miss T.B. Zoroaster, Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Caesar, Crassus, Pompey, Diotharus, Nero, Julian the Apostate, and Napoleon all perished, unfortunately, yet they had been promised all things auspicious and favorable in the predictions of the astrologers. The star of empire rises in the south, soars northward, and sets in the west. From Rome to London, from London to New York, from New York to Chicago, and from Chicago to San Francisco will be the march of the power center, and the Pacific coast will lead all others in population. Egypt and Assyria were once the world powers, then the scepter passed north and west to Rome and Greece, then to Spain and France, then to Germany, then to Great Britain, then across the Atlantic, and next it will pass across the continent. The North always conquers the South. In the long run, For the northerners are always hardier and the southerners more indolent, owing to nature's indulgence. 10 out of 11 people live north of the equator. The farther north they get, the harder they have to work, and hence the better they are. This little essay will suffice as an answer to Socrates, who desired to be the first correspondent to have his question answered in the first issue of Shadowland. His wish has come true, but his was not the first letter received. The Sage. End of section 19.